will do this, says the Lord all-powerful. Remember the teaching of Moses, my servant, those laws and rules I gave to him on Mount Sinai for all the Israelites. But I will send you Elijah the prophet before that great and terrifying day of the Lord's judging. Elijah will help parents love their children and children love their parents. Otherwise, I will come and put a curse on the land.
It's a very strange passage. And actually, we're not even going to look at this passage, which you might think, well, what's the point in having it? But there is a reason, and just bear with me on that reason. Sorry. We'll get our first slide up, and then we'll go from there. Who does not like waiting? Who is just kind of fed up with waiting in the queue, waiting at a traffic light, waiting for the food to be done, waiting in the supermarket queue, knowing full well that if you go into the other queue, that's going to stop. I'm always convinced that if I find someone who gets fed up and goes to the other queue, that I stay in the queue I'm at because they'll get the longer queue. But we get fed up. We get tired. We get tired of waiting. I much prefer now. I much prefer it's ready. But there's an expectation. You see, when we wait for something, there's an understanding that something's going to change, something's going to be different. There's an end to the TV series or the film series or the book series. There's an end to the gifts that you get that you can then now play with them. There is an end or an expectation that when the dinner bell rings, you can have food or pudding or whatever it is. You wait and you wait and you wait and you think, is it nearly ready? Is it nearly time? Now imagine you are a child and the parents are going to say to you, you are going to get the best Christmas present ever. And so you wait, you're like, oh yes, can't wait. Christmas Day comes in. It's not there. Oh, sorry, we couldn't, we ran out of time, it wasn't available. I'm always remembering there's the one film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's trying to get this present. That's a fantastic film. It doesn't come, and your parents say, oh, next year. And you wait, and then next year comes along, and Christmas, and you open the presents, and sorry, it's going to be the year after. How long before you think, it's not really going to happen? Maybe you're at work and your job says, we're going to change something. It's going to be better. We're going to pay you more with less hours. How many's waited for that to happen? New system in place. It's going to be easier. Things will work out and it's going to happen on this date. And that date comes and the boss is like, oh, yeah, sorry. It's going to be a little bit longer. And then you wait. And the politicians say on this day, we're going to do this. Anyhow. And you wait, and it doesn't happen. How long before you go, yeah, it's not going to happen. It simply isn't going to happen. What about your faith, your belief? How long do you wait for something to happen? Maybe you've been promised something. You've read something in the Bible, and it says this is what's going to happen. Your parents say something to you, and just have faith. Just do this, just believe in this, and this will happen. You tell your children, just trust us, have this faith, keep believing, things will get better, things will change, things will happen. Their children tell their children, nothing changes, it's still the same. Their children tell their children. How long do you wait? 10 years? 50 years? 100 years? When do you think, maybe this faith stuff isn't real? Maybe God isn't really with us. Maybe it's all a lie. For thousands of years, God's chosen people followed the 600 plus Mosaic laws. I started going through some of them and they were ridiculous. But they tried to follow all of these massive laws. Clearly they couldn't, which is why you then had the sacrificial system. But they tried to follow it. They tried to live a certain way. They set themselves apart. They looked at their neighbors and said, this is what the neighbors do, but we're not going to do that because we are set apart. We are a different people. And you find out that time is going by. You look at things that happen and you think it's still the same. We wanted something to be better, and it didn't happen. So we read Malachi. It's the last book in the Old Testament before the New Testament. And we read, someone is coming. Something is going to be different than what it was before. And then there's a silence. For 400 years, the Jewish people wait and wait and wait. Soon God will act. That's what they tell their children. God will make a difference. That's what they tell the generations to come. 400 years they wait. They're told to keep going. Hold on. Just keep having that belief. And for 400 years we have silence from God. Maybe God forgot his people. But the rest of the world is moving on. It's a good thing. 400 years of silence, 400 years of waiting, 400 years of questions. Will rescue come? Will love come down? Will God ever speak again? This must have been difficult for the Jewish people. Has God forgotten us? In 333 BC, Israel fell to the Greeks. And then in 323, it fell to the Egyptians. The Jewish people adopted the Greek language, and unfortunately, they also adopted the Greek customs. However, the Old Testament was translated into Greek, known as the Septuagint. And so people who were Greek, who spoke the Greek language, learned about God. And they learned about the expectation. And so they were waiting. Where is your God in all this? How many times have you heard people today say that? Where is your God in all of these things that are happening right now in the world today? We could easily spend a long time discussing that. In 204 BC, Antioch Epiphanes began persecuting the Jews. And then you had an uprising by Judas Maccabeus. It's a bit history here. 165 BC, the Jews recaptured Jerusalem, but there was continual fighting between the Jews and the Syrians. Then the Romans gained control in 63 BC, and then in 47 BC, Caesar installed Antipater, who was a descendant of Esau, a procurator of Judea, and he eventually appointed two sons over Galilee and Judea. So if you are a Christian of any sort, or you've heard the stories, you would have known the names of those towns and villages. And in the New Testament, we get Herod the Great, who was a descendant of Esau. Fancy chap? History is great. It's wonderful, unless you're living in it. You see, those 400 years of silence saw war, saw pestilence, saw destruction, being conquered and doing the conquering. And through it all, you would have had a father, a mother, and a child saying, hang in there, keep going, trust in God, keep living this way, keep doing this, keep following the laws, keep on just doing what we've always done. All the while, everyone else was living a better life. Sometimes you see, I don't know about you, but how many times do you see those who don't go to church, or those who don't claim Christianity as their faith, living a lifestyle, and you think, they're doing all right. Why would I want to be a Christian when I can do some of these things? They seem to be really enjoying themselves. I come to church and I see a bunch of miserable people. I'm not saying you guys, but we'll leave it there. But you look at some of your colleagues and you're going, they're actually enjoying themselves. Why are we so miserable? And we wait, and we wait, and we wait, and yet God was silent during that time. And maybe they wondered, where was God in all this? Why has he left us? What are we supposed to do while we wait? How many times have you looked in your own situation in your own life and thought, why is God not acting on this? We looked at prayer, faith last week, and the faith that God can give us, but you still have to live each day towards it, don't you? It's very easy for me to say, God will give you the faith. Just trust in him. Yeah, but I still have a child that's sick. I still have a family member that's ill. I still have my own problems. I still have a work. I still have to live each day. It's very easy to say that to someone. Where is God in all this? Whether you're a Christian or not, waiting is just a reality of life. We always wait for things. Waiting in the hardest of trials. The Bible tells us there's a reason for the waiting. You see, God specifically calls us at times to wait. And this is where it becomes difficult. Because there are times God says to you, wait. I need you to wait. I need you to understand this. I need you to wait. And I'm going to look at it just really quickly, just a few things, why I think he calls us to wait. First off, increase our trust in him. You see, God uses waiting to remind us that we are at the mercy, literally, of God. God's timing, God's purpose, God's plan. We crave control. I don't know maybe if this is a bloke thing or not, but I want control. I want to be able to do things. I want to know that I can achieve, and it will be on my time. Am I the only one? But I want that control. And actually, waiting forces me to rely on someone else. And that's really difficult for me, because I like to be able to do stuff myself. And I do find myself sort of going, have you done this? You know, that's just, we can debate, and we can say, well, we're just trying to make sure. That's lack of trust. And it really demoralizes the person you're speaking to, because you're saying you don't trust them and you can do it better. And that is something I'm definitely guilty of. But waiting forces us to rely on God. It's as simple as that. I'm sure we've all heard, it's all in God's timing. Everyone hear that? You know, that typical, yeah. I'm trying to think of the nice word to say. But that typical response, some Christians say, oh, well, it's all in God's timing. You know, I want to say something else to them. But the reality is, it is. It is in God's timing. It is in his plan. It is in his purpose. He sees the bigger picture. He sees the end. Do we trust that? Do we actually trust that God's plan and God's timing for us is right? Well, as long as it's like by 12 o'clock, God. It could be 12:01. Do we honestly trust God's timing? Waiting also forces us to remove our expectations. You know, we live in an accomplish-driven culture where everything's measured by productivity, how much you can get done in a certain amount of time. This defines your worth. And putting our worth, our plans, and productivity takes us away from trusting in God. When we only rely on ourselves to do it, we take away from what God can do through us. Galatians 6:9, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time, at God's time, we will reap the harvest, as long as we don't give up. We want to do things, don't we? We want to say, I'll help God along in this. He's a bit busy. I'll just, he's got other things going on. He's got other plans, other purposes. He's too busy. I will help him along, and I'll take action. And God is saying, wait. Waiting causes us humility. As our eyes are taken off ourselves, waiting changes us. God uses waiting to make us humbler. You see, waiting reveals our lack of control. It exposes our weakness and vulnerability. I really hate that. I'll just be honest with you guys. When I can't do something and I have to wait on other people, it just does my head in. And I don't like it, and I get agitated, and I get grumpy. I know that's shocking to you guys, but I do. I find it frustrating. But at the end of it, I have to put my hands down and just go, sorry, I can't do it. It creates in me a humbleness. Psalm 8, 3 and 4, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings, that you care for them. You see, waiting is like a stop sign. I have the choice. I have to be patient. I can either ungratefully fight it or contentedly embrace it. See, patience says we are faithfully trusting in Lord's timing, not our own. Wait for the Lord and be strong. Let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. See, realizing why God makes us wait is the start of trusting Him. But there's more in this waiting. See, when we have to wait, and sometimes some of you are forced to wait. This is off my nose, but this was made aware quite a while ago by someone who was a kind of very well-known minister. Very, very well-known minister. And his health suffered tremendously as a result. And a lot of people were sort of saying, oh, well, just trust in God, just trust in this. And what he found out was that God put a stop sign on his life because he wasn't relying on God. He was relying on what he wanted to do. And God, in his love, stopped. And that was his health. And his health forced him to his knees, literally. Sometimes God makes us wait. But the reason why is because he wants us to focus on the present. I shared this earlier to the diaconate, and I want to share it to you guys a little bit. But I found I was home with the family, but I wasn't home. Is everyone clear with me what I'm trying to say here? The kids were doing things, the wife Lydia was doing things, and things were happening, but I wasn't there. I was thinking about other things. Holy things, church things. I wasn't there. I was not waiting. I was busy, and I wasn't there for the family. And I think waiting forces us to hear, and now, and the why. Take today as a gift of what we have and use the most of it, because tomorrow is not promised, and we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. Those of you who have kids that are now older, you're never going to get that time back. Those of you who have parents that are older, you're never going to get that time back. You yourselves and your partners, you're never going to get that time back. Be content with what you have now and recognize that God sometimes forces us to wait in ways which seem unkind. But he loves us, and he wants us to recognize there's a purpose and plan to his waiting. Abraham and Sarah waited for a son. Joseph waited for promotion. Moses waited to lead the Israelites. Joshua waited for the promised land. Ruth waited for a husband. David waited to become king. Elijah waited for rain. Job waited for the suffering to end. When will it end? Paul waited to be released from prison. Those times of waiting, those people were called to serve their families and those around them, to learn about and listen expectantly to God, to pray without ceasing, not grumble or complain, and fulfill the ordinary work of God that he's called them to. It wasn't glamorous or showy or even exciting sometimes, but it prepared them for what lay ahead. You see, in God's wisdom, he knew Abraham and Sarah needed decades to prepare them to trust in him. Joseph needed years of languishing in prison to learn humility. Moses needed 40 years as a country shepherd before he could shepherd God's people. Joshua needed his 40 years assisting Moses to learn about leadership and courage. God knows what we need. And if he wants us to wait, it is always for our good. God is just simply asking for faithfulness. In our reading, we found out that the people of God waited for 400 years, an opportunity to learn and study and surrender his trust, and to wait for what God has plans ahead. And in that waiting, that people were getting fed up and tired, and where was God, and questioning all this stuff. In that waiting, a young girl called Mary catches the eye of a young apprentice carpenter called Joseph. In that waiting, of being fed up, of being tired, of wondering if God was actually with us, the hotels were being booked up, and one innkeeper's heart was being softened. In the waiting, shepherds were being guided to a small village called Bethlehem. In the waiting, signs were happening which forced leaders and magicians and scientists and smart people to question, what is this sign happening? In the waiting, a young man called Saul was beginning his studies under a very well-known teacher called Gamaliel. I can't remember his name. You know who I'm talking about. In the waiting, some fishermen and doctors and others were being gathered around a small time. In all of that waiting, where people have said, God is no longer with us. God doesn't care about us. God isn't answering us off. He was maneuvering and positioning and guiding and strengthening and encouraging people and events for something to happen. The short sermon series we've got is God with Us. Oh, sorry. Chubby fingers. God with us. And through all of our waiting, God is indeed with us, guiding, placing, appointing, softening, encouraging events and people in our lives for the purpose of us to learn more about Him, for His glory. And we're given a time, as I said, sometimes God will force us to wait, and there's a purpose for it. In that time, we have an opportunity to learn more about God, to be patient, to be kind. But in that same time, we're also given an opportunity to grumble, to complain, to ignore, to waste, to turn away. We each have the same 24 hours. I sometimes think some people have more than that, but apparently we all have 24 hours. And you've got an opportunity. We all have an opportunity to either be an advocate or an adversary, to either build up or tear down, an opportunity to grow or to waste. And in the end, when God's action behind the scenes are revealed, they find us either graciously, patiently, obediently waiting, or they find us lacking in our trust for Him. You see, He's with us every step of the way. But He doesn't force our steps. He will simply show us a path, and we can choose to follow it, either in the movement or in the waiting. Some of you may have been waiting for a long time, waiting for an answer for something for a long time. God still hears you, and He is still with you. But there could be a reason He's asking you to wait, to trust, to be obedient, because things have to be put in place. I'm always reminded of I'm pretty much finished, a chess piece, and someone described this as your Christian life. And I'm not really good at chess. Or I could be. You don't know. Maybe I am. But I have played a few times. Rowan's getting into it, which is great. But someone said the Christian life is like the chess pieces. And you kind of move. And the person opposite you is Kasparov. Is that the right guy? Yeah. The world champion chess. I mean, this is going back to, I don't know who it is now. But, the guy that can, imagine 50 steps ahead of you. And every one step you do, he can think 60 steps. And he said, that's what the Christian life is sometimes like. God is saying, I know every step. And we're going, I'm going to move that night. And God is going, just wait, trust me. I know the place to put it. And some of you are eager to move ahead, to move that place, to get moving. And you're fed up with waiting. And God is saying, trust me. Just wait patiently. Continue to learn, continue to study, continue to grow in me. There's a reason and a plan and a purpose. Trust me in this. It will work out. That is a promise from God. It will work out. So wherever you are, God with us. That's still on there. God with us. God is with you. If you don't know Him personally, He is still with you. He still wants you to know Him personally. But that's what we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks that God is indeed with us and his plans and purpose for you hasn't changed. So if you have been waiting, trust in him. I'm going to open up to prayer. Father God, we just come before you, and maybe it is just me, but sometimes I'm tired of the waiting. I want something to happen. I want the tomorrow to be today so I can get on with things. And as much as I want to trust in you, I'm also human, and I'm also frail, and I know I make mistakes. And so I just present that to you, and I just ask that you'd give me peace in knowing you are with me. Not just in my head, but also in my heart. And for anyone else here who has that same aggravation, worry and doubt and fear of waiting, bring them peace, Lord. And help us to remember over these next 3 weeks that you are with us. Amen.